Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of the Naked Guru Experience. These are conversations on psychology, philosophy, spirituality, and consciousness. Please do subscribe to our content to support the channel. Just to mention also our latest project, Remembering Ourself Sharing Circles, are now online. We now have groups in the UK, USA, and Australia. Sharing circles are open to anyone that would like to share their life experience, entheogenic experiences, or other views and opinions with like-minded individuals. Groups take place via Zoom every week and are completely free. For more information, you can check out below. Today's guest is Greg Lake. Greg is a trial and appellate attorney, advocate, and entheogenic church consultant. He is also the author of Psychedelics in Mental Health. Today, we will be discussing the future of psychedelic churches worldwide, where people can stop in and get the help they need. Welcome to the podcast, Greg.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. I'm blessed to be here.
So, Greg, it's very interesting work you're involved with here, and I saw your work through social media. We became connected through social media, and so I've seen what you're doing with the book Psychedelics in Mental Health, and what you're doing with the churches. But before we go into that, I'd just like to know a little bit more about you. How did the journey start for you into this field of inquiry, let's say?
All right. Well, it's been a long journey, Ryan. I guess it started. Let me give some context to it. I was a drug addict and alcoholic for a long time, close to 17 years. So I started about the age of 12. I started eating psychedelics around that time. One of the first drugs I ever, got involved with was LSD. And, obviously back then I had no idea about the spirituality or the spiritual aspects of psychedelics. So let's see, fast forward, I went to law school. And while I was in law school, I lost my mother my second year. It was a pretty traumatic experience. Not too long after that, I had my first mystical experience on psilocybin. Had some very powerful and deep epiphanies that stuck with me despite my addiction over the next, I guess, probably 5 years. I ended up homeless after passing the Texas bar. I practiced for maybe a year or two, but ended up homeless in my addiction. And not too long after that, about a year or two later, I ended up in a long-term inpatient treatment facility that was a therapeutic community. And through getting sober and working that program, a lot of those deep spiritual epiphanies that I had 5 years earlier kind of came to the forefront and really assisted me in picking up those principles and applying them in my sobriety and getting through the treatment. Um, and then once I graduated there, September 2018, I finally, I went without a phone for almost 2 years. So when I got my phone back, I was able to, I saw a lot of the articles about the research coming out. And, I went through a couple tough times once I got out of rehab and engaged with the medicine a few more times. And then also seeing these articles, I decided that the space would do well by having a book or a comprehensive guide that kind of lays it all out, because it was more or less scattered across the web at the time. And so me being the, I guess, intellectual I am, it was frustrating to me. I said, I want to know, I want the complete picture. And so I sought out to put that resource together. And so when COVID hit, it kind of just gave me the perfect opportunity to kind of bear down and put all this together to publish the book. Now, once I published the book, and I will say that I had some spiritual messages come to me prior to publishing my book that told me my ultimate purpose in this wasn't necessarily the book, that other things would come and that I needed to follow that path. So once I published the book, I was approached by a man here in Louisiana about helping him start up an entheogenic church. I didn't know a lot about the law at the time here in the U.S. I knew a little bit. I knew about the UDV case and stuff like that. So I really dove into that research and figured out that for the most part, these entheogenic churches, if they're exercising sincerely, are protected. So with that, I delved into the research, helped this gentleman out. A couple other people kind of caught wind, and then it just kind of has snowballed from there. And I think right now I'm at about 8 to 10 churches that I've helped get all their paperwork in order and get to get set up properly. And that's about it, man. And so I'm just trying to do everything I can to help these people out. I'm in the process of starting up a website here over the next couple months that's going to help connect people worldwide to these different places. Hopefully people will start to realize that, locally that they have an ayahuasca church or an entheogenic church that's established that they can go to engage with the medicine, on that level. And so it's just kind of been like a snowball with detours, but it's been a very good journey, and I'm looking forward to the future and just try to help out, any way that I can.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful. Before we go into kind of the details of the church, about your personal story, it sounds like you went through a pretty rough time personally. And for you, was it the rehab program, or was it the mushroom that kind of helped you get free of your addiction? Was it a combination of the two? Or?
It was most definitely a combination of the two, Ryan. So the therapeutic community I was in is a very, very tough program. Maybe 1 in 100 people that walk in the front door complete it. And I tell people this all the time, like, I've gone to a few retreats, obviously since I've been doing the church work, and there's a lot of people that are coming across these really deep spiritual principles that they're discovering through working with the medicine, and so a lot of those I actually got whenever I was sober in the therapeutic community. Now, I do say that I drew a lot upon my prior experience with psilocybin, but had to do a real life, real world application in the therapeutic community because, on a daily basis there, you kind of had to reach deep down inside yourself and check your motives, check your intentions. And really, it took a lot of heart to make it through there. And so I would say a little bit of both, but I don't want to downplay the program because the program most definitely put me on that level because you had to in order to survive it.
Yeah, and so I mean, for the program, what did it actually involve? What was the key parts of the program?
So a therapeutic community is basically a community of people who are there, and there's a lot of rules and guidelines. Okay, and you're supposed to hold others accountable, and you're supposed to ultimately hold yourself accountable for the rules and guidelines. And it's meant to keep you in your feelings. I think the ultimate takeaway from a therapeutic community is that when you complete the program, you will have superior emotional control because for an example, so they have these things called verbal chairs. And so you might show up, you're a 30-year-old man. Well, there might be an 18-year-old that's been there, maybe a year, sees you break a rule and tells you have to go sit down in this chair, basically an adult timeout for a period of time. And so it takes a certain level of humility and emotional control not to flash out when something like that happens, because in the program I was at, when that happens, your only proper response is thank you and go to the chair. If you don't, it leads to other consequences. So again, it kind of, this humility and emotional control aspect of the program, uh, it just really set me up for success. Post once I graduated, I see it permeate through all levels of my life, and I'm very grateful for it. But with the mushrooms, I kind of before had this epiphany about what really matters in life. You know what I mean? And what really am I going for? And so I just knew deep down in my heart that in order for me to excel spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, like I had to complete this program. And so it was a whatever it takes type thing. And I just realized that a lot of this stuff that I had attached emotional importance to throughout my whole life was really unimportant. And so with that, I was able to kind of get through those types of situations and just do what was required and move forward and really put my emotional attachment to important things that were going to advance me in life.
Yeah, I mean, could you? I don't want to get too personal with you, Greg, but could you give as an example of that, perhaps, of what you'd attach some kind of importance to, which you recognize wasn't as important as you thought?
You know, just generally, people say something wrong to you or you felt offended by certain things. I think that's what a lot of it boils down to is a lot of people or get so offended by things people say or do, and they take them so personal. That was probably the major hurdle of me, is to realize that what people do and say a lot of times, even when they're directed at me, aren't really attacking me on a personal level, especially if I feel secure within myself. That was probably the most major thing that I had to get over, and just the poor me attitude, poor me this, poor me that. I kind of had to get over that and realize, and just toughen up a little bit. It's really helped me get through.
Man, this is it's such an inspiring story as well. Did you you graduated before you got sober? Is that right, or
No, no,
after
I,
you got
I
sober?
got sober so I actually went to jail. I was on a misdemeanor probation at the time. I failed a drug test when I went in December 2015. So when I went back to report early January 2016, as soon as I got into the probation office, I knew what time it was. They put me in handcuffs and took me to jail. And at that time, it was like, my dad called me, or I called my dad, and he's like, "Look, you're either going to go to long-term treatment, or you're not going to practice law in the state of Texas again." They're demanding that you do long-term treatment. And so at that time, I just decided, like, I want something different for my life, and I like want to live up to my full potential. So that was the time when I got sober, and then spent about 45 days in jail, and then was transferred to that facility, and it's just been up from there.
And then you studied law after this, right? Is that
No,
right?
I was already a licensed. All this happened.
Oh, wow.
I was able to, when my mother was alive, me and my mother were very close. And so, one of her requirements for me was, make good grades. So, like, even despite all my addictions through high school, college, law school, I never wanted to disappoint my mother. And so I was able to, keep it together good enough to make good grades and get through all this education. And, I barely, I passed the Texas bar the first time, but I was kind of petering out at that time. My mom had died maybe a year and a half, 2 years prior. And so I was kind of petering out at that point, but was able to pass. But I was on the downhill slide at that time, and so I didn't get much practice under my belt. Once I did get a license, my addiction took me so far down, I basically just gave it up when I got homeless. So for about 2 years, I was just homeless, running the streets. Had some very traumatic things happen to me, but with the medicine, it's all, it doesn't even cross my mind anymore. Well, I remember those memories, but I don't attach any kind of emotional value to them. It's just an experience.
Yeah, I mean, there is a commonality with a lot of our communities, and a common story that occurs for us all, that our journeys often involve like a deep kind of suffering. Something really terrible happens. I think that happens in life. Maybe we get addicted. Maybe we turn to alcohol. Maybe it was childhood problems. Parents passing away, as you say. It's like some traumatic event leads us into despair and into this darkness of ourself. This kind of it's almost like wandering in hell or something. It's like your life becomes living hell. Like heaven and hell are not things after you die. They exist here on this plane. But then there is a process where some of us are able to pull our heads above water enough, or we have access to the plant teachers or to the tools that we require in order to die and be reborn anew. Whereas the old life then is just, okay, that happened. I'm over that. I'm not attached to it, and you can kind of start again. And I think what the plant medicines are doing, particularly things like LSD and psilocybin, are really helping initiate that ego death and that rebirth, and are really showing you angles of yourself where you can recover. Has that been your experience with the mushroom and in the entheogenic churches as well?
Absolutely. So, I mean, speaking for me personally, like, now I look upon my past as my greatest teacher. It's kind of shifted my view on it, that, like, modern society wants to tell me that, oh, you were an addict. That's so bad. You need to just, like, kind of, talk away this part of your life and say you're sorry for what you did. But, for me, I started to look at it as really my greatest strength, that I've been through so many miserable situations that anything I kind of go through now is just really not not that bad, And so I've kind of looked upon and I've forgiven myself for everything that I've done. I can't control that. I have no control over it, and I kind of came to that realization through all this too. Is that I don't have any control over that. It happened, but as far as all the suffering that I put myself through all those years, really strengthened me at my core, to where I can do the work now that I need to do. So I kind of see this as part of my story and plan for my life. That had I not been through these experiences, I would not have the strength that I do today in order to do the kind of work that I do. To put myself out there, open to ridicule and comment and handle it and keep pushing. I don't think I would have been strong enough had I not been through that in order to propel me into the work now that I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I recently had a conversation as well with a guy that he um, he was serving in Iraq, I think it was, and he was involved in killing and things like that. And now he kind of sees a different view of things. He's like, oh well. And I said to him, what's clear to me is you cannot be blamed for your level of consciousness at a certain time. Like if you're operating at a certain level of consciousness and you do something at that level, you can't persecute yourself forever for that. Like once you've raised your level of consciousness and you've raised your understanding of what's going on, then you become accountable
Yeah.
because you know the impacts of it. Personally, I also went through a journey of addiction, quite different from you. I was a musician and
Okay.
traveling Asia, but I was addicted to alcohol for about, it just crept on me. But it was about 3 years of being completely drunk all the time while I was playing saxophone and on my stage in Thailand. I just blacking out and just completely like getting right to the edge. And the body was swelling. I was twice this weight. And then something happened where I just snapped out. It was with the plant teachers, and I underwent this death and rebirth experience. So I can really empathize with your story. It's a very similar kind of thing. We get addicted and then we get freed somehow. So yeah,
And, and I like the point you just made about, once we reach a certain level of consciousness, like then we can start holding ourselves accountable for those, I hate for like lower vibrational actions, and look, we're all human, I wish I could say every day everything I did was, real on a high lane of consciousness. I try to get better every day, but I do hold myself accountable though. If I feel like I did something that's not quite right, and a lot of this came through the program too, is that I just readily admit it. And if I wrong someone, I readily admit it and I apologize, and move on. I don't let myself get beat up with resentments or hang-ups anymore. I just clear that air, clear the energy, and move forward.
yeah, I also really do like to discuss things like this on the podcast. We don't always get the opportunity to do it, but I think is for listeners that are also struggling with addiction or also kind of going through their own working on themselves. I mean, it never ends. We're always working on ourselves all the time, but I think that it's always good to listen to other people and realize, oh yeah, it's not just me that's like this. It's like
Yeah.
quite when everybody has this kind of this problem that we have to kind of overcome in ourselves and really kind of put the effort in, but also don't be afraid to ask for help. And there is a lot of kind of support out there. And I'm a big proponent of the plant teachers. I mean,
Yes.
they can help you in a way that no, not necessarily another person can. It's if used in the correct way under
Yep.
the certain settings. Yeah.
I heard an interesting thing. I was listening to a podcast, and it happened like 2 years ago, but a podcast from an American guy that had set up a place in South America and was real knowledgeable on the plant teachers. But he basically said that these plants are spirits that are so wise and so knowledgeable that the only way to make sense to manifest them is in the form of a plant. Like you could not manifest these teachers in the form of a human because they would be so knowledgeable. I mean, we would literally attach the importance of God to them. But yeah, so it's like you can sit there and talk to a therapist, a counselor, not to downplay those roles at all, for years and years and years, but they do not have the basis of knowledge and wisdom as these plant teachers do. And like you say, if you're in the right context to let those teachers speak to you in the proper forum, you can get a lot done in a very little amount of time.
What I also find interesting is when I talk with people about this, I find a commonality here is in the early days, if you ever kind of do mushrooms or the LSD when you're younger and you're just doing them to party in college, you don't have that spiritual experience.
No.
It's a completely different. You might as well be talking about two different things. I still have a lot of close friends that have no idea what I'm talking about. They they just like they're like tripping, but
Yeah.
they've got no idea like what are you talking about spiritual and universe. I just like getting high and tripping. And so it always surprises me this contrast between doing them in the early days and not having this kind of connecting with the source and communicating with the universe, and then when we go through addiction, we go through life and we decide to use the tool in a way to kind of overcome our traumas or whatever's happened to us, and work through our problems. It's a whole different experience, right?
Absolutely, and so I guess the first time I had my mystical experience was shortly after my mother's death, and I came to them with an open heart and an open mind, and in a way was seeking some resolution to some of those issues, and they did provide them. Unfortunately, my addiction to opiates at that time, if I didn't continue my addiction the next day, I'd have been sick. But they definitely told me about my addiction, and to the point to where during the experience I was crying because I felt like I was helpless. But I knew the teachers were telling me this is not good. You're not you're not doing your body or your mind or your soul any justice by what you're doing. So absolutely. But again, to your point, when I came to them with that intention, they definitely delivered, and I think they can for pretty much everyone who is open to the experience. To experience it like that.
Have you found as well, like certainly in my journey over the years now, first it was kind of you have to give up alcohol, you have to give up cigarettes, you have to give up sugar was next, but it seems to me like a stripping away, a cleansing of the body. What the plant teachers are really trying to show us is you have to tune this instrument, and the more you tune it, the more you can connect with bliss, the more you can connect with oneness, more you can be present. But the stuff that you're putting in your body is I mean, I can't even have carbs, sugar, anything. I mean, it's pretty. My diet is very, very bland. It's like rice and vegetables every day, same thing. I don't know if you've had much of experience like this, this kind of honing down or tuning the body. And
Yeah, no. So my diet isn't quite as strict as yours, but I do eat clean foods, and I do eat protein, but it's all really easily digestible protein. I work out a lot and stuff, but very clean diet. And I found that when I eat clean, and for me, like I go to the gym, whenever I'm physically stronger and pushing myself, like I feel like my mind, body, and spirit uh, are more in tune. And that's just me. I think everybody's probably a little different in that regard. But for me, that's what I found. But most definitely on the diet, when I graduated Centacor, I started really dieting, kind of strictly. And I just noticed that I was just a happier, more outgoing, uh, didn't feel groggy, like I had more energy. And it just helped me kind of raise my vibration through eating right and exercising properly, which has obviously helped in my sobriety and helped, with all my work endeavors.
yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for being so honest about your story as well, Greg. That's great. I think it calls upon all of us to do that, to be very honest about the journey,
Yep.
because it does set the stage for people that are coming through these problems still. I just want to do one more note on this, because you said something that also resonates with me. One problem I had, or one issue I personally faced with AA was, and by the way, I love AA. I love the 12 steps.
Yep.
Big fan. Don't take if you're suffering from alcoholism, AA is your first point of call. But for me, it required me to identify as an addict continuously. or
Mhm.
identify as somebody in recovery. And it was very important for me to drop that label, to say, all right, I'm recovered and not in recovery. How have you found that? Do you class yourself as in recovery, or are you recovered?
Well, I think that's for me personally, it's kind of a multifaceted question. Like I do feel recovered and I don't beat myself up and tell people, continuously that I am an addict and all this. I do realize that I could be one bad decision away from, getting back into that life. So I do keep that kind of at the forefront, and realize that, it takes making good, consistent decisions on a daily basis for me. But I don't get buried down in, and I will say this: I don't condone AA either, and I do attend meetings periodically. But I just see a lot of people in there, and it's unfortunate. A lot of those people are on all these medications that the doctors just write them, freely, and I don't. Sometimes, to be honest with you, Ryan, like I don't know if some of those people would be better off just going back to drinking or taking those medications because they still seem so miserable and down on themselves and beat themselves up. And some people have years of sobriety talking like this. I do believe, and I think you're kind of getting at a point that we need to talk good to ourselves and pump ourselves up and let us know that we can do absolutely anything we put our mind to. I think that mindset in AA has people closer to relapse than if they just, like you say, said, "No, I'm recovered. I beat it. My life is different now, and I'm going to chase, my dreams on this end now." But I do understand from it. I think it's a very valid way to feel about it.
I think, I will elaborate on that just a little bit as well. It's for me, it was just heartbreaking to be around these groups of these
Hmm.
other human beings that I empathize with and that I like. Man, if I can just give you some mushrooms, or if I could just give you 500 micrograms, you might find there's a whole different view. And when I brought this up in meetings, I was told you shouldn't talk about that,
Yeah.
that it's not appropriate to talk about. And so for me, I was caught with this dilemma of, God, these other human beings I want to help, but I can't talk about this stuff, and I can't be honest about how I got sober. And we can't talk about how Bill Wilson himself got sober, who's founded AA. And so that was a real difficult for me. And that was one part of me saying I had to pull myself out of this and say I'm just recovered. And
Yep.
that was hard because I feel like we could get so much more done if AA, for some select people that were ready, we could inject some entheogens in there and get people healing and get people recovered.
I agree, and I do touch in my book, periodically on the Bill. As a recovered addict, I touch, a little bit on the Bill Wilson thing in there, and obviously mention the Johns Hopkins studies with addiction that they're doing on psilocybin. And yeah, I mean, it kind of gets to me too. Again, I feel so bad because these people are just doing what their doctor tells them, eating these antidepressants and other drugs, that are really, in my view, seeing a lot of the people just making it worse. Where I feel like cut all that out, consult the plant teachers, as needed, and I don't think you'll have a problem. Well, I think you would be living a better quality of life, in my opinion. There's a group here in the U.S. and I think it's actually international. It's called Psychedelics in Recovery. That's a group of people that they kind of follow the AA model, but they support each other in everyone's own little defined plan and consulting the plant teachers in furthering their recovery. And it's a beautiful group. I haven't been in a little bit, but it's a beautiful group, and I would encourage anyone who is in recovery, but also consults the plant medicines or psychedelics in general to check them out because it's a very supportive group. And it's amazing to hear some of the stories in there of the people, how bad they were, got to the plant medicine, and then now they're living these, just good, clean, fulfilled lives.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's great to know that these groups are coming up. Obviously, these things start in the States and in the West, and then they move over. But it's yeah, it's good to know that is happening. And I think maybe we'll have a future where there's more of that, and there's groups available worldwide, which kind of brings us now to the topic of this discussion, which is kind of what you're already doing with the churches. Really, you've got this psychedelics in recovery group, but the churches also offer a potential for people to stop in and get the help that they need. So, could you tell us a little bit about the churches and what's going on in there? Is it mushroom based, ayahuasca based? Is it a mix? What's happening in there?
So that's kind of a multifaceted question, but so I would say that most are ayahuasca based at this point. Now, and that's due to the UDV decision in 2006 that basically the Supreme Court okayed the ayahuasca church, the UDV, and then later on the courts also ratified the Santo Daime consumption of ayahuasca, and now it looks like Soul Quest in Florida is going to be either has or will be getting a DEA exemption soon. But with my reading of the law, uh, any kind of religious practice that is sincere, which is a very low burden to meet, it's valid. So, is there fair game to have mushroom churches? And not to say that there are some psilocybin churches. There's some mixed churches. My reading of the law is that a church could have multiple sacraments. I mean, look, as long as you are, again, it goes back, as long as it's a sincere exercise of religion and you're using these entheogens to contact a power greater than yourself, call it spirit, the creator, whatever you want to call it, if that is your sacrament that helps you commune or is the primary way of you communing with a greater spiritual power, then it's really fair game. I mean, at that point, it just comes down to, are you doing it in a safe way? As long as you're not putting people in danger and you're handling the substances in a responsible way where they're not leaking out into the streets. Those would be the other two main concerns. But again, the threshold of meeting the sincerity in the United States is fairly low. But I encourage people that I've been working with to, set out a statement of beliefs that's sincere, that don't shoot for the low burden. Try to get it solid to where if the court ever calls it into question, you can let the document speak for itself, and they can say, well, these people are definitely using this for a higher spiritual purpose, and so government, now you're going to have to prove that they're endangering people or this is leaking out into the streets. And so, as we've seen, in 2006, the Supreme Court, as far as the safety is concerned, it was like 50-50 there, but because the government has to prove a compelling governmental interest, 50-50 doesn't meet their burden. And that was based off of I think the court paid a lot of attention to a study that was done, man, I think maybe sometime in the 90s by Dennis McKenna, and another researcher actually went to Brazil, I believe, and examined, I think, some of the Santo Daime people, consuming ayahuasca regularly, and just kind of took notes on their progress and health, and said, basically this ayahuasca is really helping these people, and they are very healthy physically and mentally, and especially spiritually. So the court took note, and agreed with that. And so with regards to psilocybin, with the state of the research now in the clinical trials and the safety profile that's been worked up on it, the government's going to have a very, very, very hard time shutting down like a psilocybin church that's sincerely using these sacraments in their religion. That's my view on it.
Do your clients have to have a property, like it's the church itself? Do they have to have like a licensed property, and does that property have to meet any certain requirements?
So no, I'm saying no. So there's when the court looks at a religion, there's the second part of the equation beyond just the beliefs is called the accoutrements. And basically those are outward manifestations of a religion, and it goes from, what's your ceremony structure? Do you have a place, a gathering place? And it's all, none of those factors are dispositive, right? So do they have to have a place? No. Now, let's go a little bit further. Now, there's also this issue in the U.S. that we call DEA exemptions. Now, The DEA exemptions would probably require that you have a physical place, but right now those are being called into question as being unconstitutional and illegal in a prior restraint on First Amendment rights. So right now in California, there's a case that they're basically calling all that into question. Not to say that in the future the DEA couldn't promulgate some requirements that are legal and constitutional, but as they stand right now, and I've talked to a couple different lawyers across the U.S. who are in this space about it, and the consensus is no, they're not. And so I would say right now, no, it does not require a steady place or a gathering place. Now, with that being said, in order to establish a nonprofit in a state, you're going to need like a mailing address, things of that nature. So most people that I've worked with do have at least some location that they're affiliated with. But I've dealt with some people who mostly travel around and hold ceremony, and that's perfectly fine because all that's required is that you are furthering a sincere religious belief and exercise. So, with that baseline, I would say no, it's not necessarily a requirement. Does it help? Is it better? Yeah, but I don't think the protection attaches to that factor alone. The way I'm reading it, it absolutely doesn't.
Right. So these things don't have to be in set buildings. You can actually move around. Do
In,
people? Yeah.
in a lot, in like I say, a lot of the churches that I've dealt with are actually on pieces of property. Like they have, sacred circles in the woods, and building teepees in the pastures and stuff. And but again, that is a physical property location, but it's not a necessary. The thing is that the way a lot of these religions are, with the plant medicine, is that the plant medicine doesn't dictate that it has like a church or a chapel that you have to go to worship at. Wherever you find a sacred spot that you like, that's good to hold ceremony, that's just as good as any.
And what about public liability insurance? Do they have to insure the individuals taking part? What if somebody, ends up having an accident, and then, I mean, that must be kind of one of your priorities that this doesn't happen, and so there's
So
no backlash.
So, so right now, I'm not aware of any insurance company that's willing to insure a place like this. So obviously, the big thing and the thing is, most of the people before they come to me already have these ideas blown in their head, and they realize that the only way we can do it right now is to inform people as much as possible of the risk involved, of the interactions with other medications and narcotics, and then just have them sign a waiver of liability. That's about as we can get right now, good as we can get right now. I'm sure some enterprising insurance people will probably come up with some kind of policy here over the next few years. But as of right now, I'm unaware of any place that offers insurance like that. And that's not to say they don't, just that I'm not aware of it. But the best I can advise people right now is to put together some good liability waivers and just advise people. But beyond that, the churches I've been working with are real. They're real serious about this stuff. So they kind of screen these people out before they come in. They're not going to let someone in that's just trying to get high or come there to try to just experiment with the medicine. The people need to fit a proper safety profile in, they're not taking certain medications, or have certain heart troubles, or history of some mental illness, and then two, have the proper intention. What are you here for? Are you trying to further your spirituality, overcome some issues in a spiritual way? Things like that, and that's pretty much how it's done here. And I think that upfront screening really helps, and is really probably the biggest barrier to something bad happening.
So it's like a skydiving model. It's
Yeah. I mean,
signing up there and making sure you're healthy to do it. Yeah.
and that's kind of sad. I'm a personal injury attorney here in Louisiana, and you know, I do feel like there should be some insurance there, so that way if someone does get hurt, that there will be some kind of compensation for them. But it's just the way it is right now, and we have to rely on the liability waivers. But I'm sure it'll change over time. As these things pop up and people see the sheer number of people participating in, participating in them, and the low incidences of people actually getting hurt, the insurance industry will catch on to that and want to start, insuring these people.
So you say you've set up so far, is it 10 churches? Is that right?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Now, there's some people who don't need a full workup. Some people just need, like, I had one gentleman that just needed a liability waiver done. So there's certain, you know, I'm not fully involved in all of the projects, but full on projects probably in the neighborhood of 8 right now. And I've only been doing this for probably 2.5 months, 2.5, 3 months.
So there's a big demand, right?
It's every week one or two people get in contact with me, and I will say this: just since I published my book, just kind of like this conversation, I'm connecting with people all over the world. This movement is gaining so much momentum and steam. And that kind of led to my website idea. I want to connect these people because I know there's tons of people out in society all over the world who have the thought that they might want to engage in these things, but they either don't know where to go, or they think the only legitimate place to go is, a $10,000 retreat in Jamaica or somewhere like that. Whenever people are holding ceremony for the most part locally, worldwide, I would say. But hopefully we'll draw those people out and they can let us know at the website, and we can, put some people in contact with them to spread the healing.
Yeah, I think another positive aspect, like you just touched on there, of what you're doing is it's often the case in the entheogenic community that we mention the Amazon being destroyed by tourists going there and whatnot, and this really does help that problem. But for the kind of ecological impact, the vine and things like that that these churches are using. Do you know of any of the churches that are growing their own stuff or planning to grow their own stuff, or is everything being imported from South America?
I would say so. I have heard, Ryan, some musings in the community that there are some people that are either growing it or experience, trying to develop a process to grow the vine. I would say for the most part, the people I know that are doing it are having it imported. And for the most part, these ayahuasca churches, it's actual South American healers that have like a circuit going where all these churches kind of get together and work together to come up with their schedules and try to work around each other. And then the healers kind of just make the circuit. And sometimes it's the healers that bring it with them. Sometimes the churches actually import it themselves. And then, but here's the real religious aspect to it, is that it's always the healer who brews it, right? Because with ayahuasca, a lot of the healing powers comes from the intention and the energy that's put into actually brewing the brew. And so again, stuff like that actually goes towards the sincerity of the exercise. But yeah, for the most part, I think it is import, but I have a feeling that that's going to slowly change over time.
Yeah, I've actually done an interview with a guy in India that is growing the vine in India.
Wow.
It's going to take so long that he'll probably be dead before they ever use it. But that's how forward thinking he is.
That's that's
Yeah,
good though.
and he's also doing it to make sure the poor that can't afford this have access to it, which is kind of my next question with us is um, obviously there's money involved in this too, because if somebody's setting up the church, I guess they're charging the participants of the circle. So I guess is there a lot of kind of interest to you if I want to set up a church because I want to make my own business, and how big is that market, and how is that market regulated? Are people paying to go to church, or?
So that's an interesting question, and this, it can be hotly debated, in the space, because a lot of people feel like this shouldn't be charged for, but at the same time, there is a lot of resources and time and effort that go into putting these things on. I'm of the mindset personally, me, that there should be some reasonable compensation to go towards the church, because yeah, they got to pay to get their legal set up. A lot of times they have properties to pay for, and then obviously paying to bring the healers in to do everything. So I do think that's some reasonable cost, and there are a lot of churches that are very reasonable. In these regards, as far as people paying to do it. But yeah, so that does kind of create a barrier for some lower income people. I do know of some healers that it's kind of like pay as you can type thing, to where, people who are, better well off pay a higher premium than people who are less well off, to kind of grant access to everybody. And I like that model. But I think eventually, that as an industry, or as a group, that these churches need to come together and figure out how they can outreach further into the poor communities, to because let's face it, a lot of times it's the poor people who probably need this medicine the most,
Yeah.
who come up with the most issues and have been through the most stuff. So I do think that's something that will need to be addressed in the future. It's kind of just getting started up, but I feel like over time, as more churches pop up, those costs will be reduced, and the market will just kind of regulate itself somewhat. So hopefully that'll make it more available for some. But I do know I've worked with two or three healers that are, to work their stuff, especially these traveling people, are some wealthier individuals who aren't really in it to turn a profit or anything. They're really just there to help. So I'm hoping that those types of people will be some of the first ones to reach out and bring in some of the lower income people from, lower income community people.
Yeah, I mean, if you've done enough ceremonies, you kind of know the illusion of the profitability and the need
Yeah.
for business. You kind of wake up to that. But just you mentioned that some are quite reasonable prices. What is the best price that you've seen as compared to kind of flying to Peru or flying to Costa Rica? As you said, some of them are charging $5,000, $10,000 for a weekend. I mean, what is the best price you've seen in some of these smaller gatherings?
As low as 150 or $200 a ceremony.
Oh, that's great.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah. As a matter of fact, the church I'm most affiliated with, that I go to on a regular basis, in Texas, is runs about 200 a ceremony for ayahuasca. And that's generally the price for every ceremony you're going to engage in there. It's pretty standard, and a big portion of that goes to the healers that come and cook it and hold ceremony in accordance with their spiritual dictates. And yeah, and look, a lot of that money ends up back in the Amazon, to their communities, to the healers communities. A lot of that money they get ends up there. So it's kind of an overall energy exchange that's going on. And again, it'll be interesting to see how the market kind of works itself out here over the next 3 to 5 years, and what that'll mean in terms of cost of ceremony. And but I will say this: I imagine there will be some places that pop up that are going to try to work strictly off real donations, that you don't not expected to show up with a dollar, but if you can donate. I tend to think that that would probably be a good model, because I will say this: a lot of the people that I see at these ceremonies are actually, unfortunately, people who are well to do, but they're very giving people. I think that if the general gist of all this was, if you come to ceremony, whatever you give will help to equalize with the people who don't have much to give. I feel like a lot of those people would actually give larger donations than what is required as of now.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the plan. It's part of the plan teaching. Once I had a ceremony where it told me that I must give all my income away, like completely every month, just give it all away, because then you wouldn't have a headache with it. And I did for about half a year, until my wife was like, "We can't do that anymore."
Yeah, yeah.
So now I just give it to her. So but it's like you get to a point where you kind of break through the illusion of the corporate and the money aspect of it. And although I think I talk to kind of wealthy individuals as well that are undergoing these experiences, and they'll often say, like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like, I had this experience and I feel I want to help, and I feel I want to do something, but what do? I give money? And I think it would be a great kind of setup if you could say, well, for every ceremony I do, it's like two of the people that don't have the money to do that are going to be able to join the group. And what you're doing is kind of proliferating the number of opportunities that can happen in, because while you've got a limited number of opportunities, well, costs are high, it's high demand. But once you've got multiple opportunities, the demand's going to be able to spread out, and more opportunity, right?
Yeah, and I will say this. So this website I'm starting up, my business partner and I have come to an agreement that once we reach a certain number of members in our website and we're turning around so many dollars per month, we're going to start taking 10% of all of our net profits and recirculating it back to hold ceremonies for people who can't otherwise afford it. And I'm hoping that other companies, in the industry, will help us join in and maybe match us, or also put donations in to help spread, the love and message of the plant medicine. I'm in this to try to spread love and awareness and healing to people. Um, and so anytime I can do that, I do my best. With these churches, I do charge them some money to help them, but it's very low. I don't really charge much at all. And it's more of just for me the gratification of helping these people. And I see that this movement is at a certain spot that if we get enough good, talented people involved to help push this along, that we can go the whole yard with it, and eventually these things will just be generally accepted and possibly legalized to where we won't be having this conversation one day. It'll just be so ubiquitous that you know that's really what I'm pressing for. At the end of the day, I could sit here and stack a bunch of money and leave it to my children. I would rather my children be participating in a ceremony one day with their friends and say, you know what, your dad really helped all this become okay, and we're not worried about any kind of law enforcement intrusion, and that's a freedom that we have, and we give gratitude and thanks for that. That's more important to me is what I leave as far as rights and abilities to my progeny.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that we kind of many of us face in this sector at the moment. Is that everybody has to kind of live as well. You have to kind of earn your money, and
Yeah.
so you can always kind of be brought up on that, like, oh, is he making a profit, or is this all about money? But you want to give back. I mean, what we do with the sharing circles, for example, is the sharing circles are about people from all over the world getting together that don't know each other and talking about their experiences. And it's completely free. So it is, and it involves multiple numbers of us that are organizing that, but it's all just free, because we also want to make it available for everybody. There's no charge to it. It actually costs money to run these things.
Yeah.
So for you to set up the churches and things, it's costing money. I assume you have an office and you got your time, and it's that's the predicament you're in.
Well, for right now, I'm actually just operating it out of my house. I do have a law office I practice out of, so I come home in the evening. So it's usually, law office 8 to 5, and then I come home and we'll take conference calls, work on documents, things like that. Probably over the next year or so, I'm probably going to set up a separate entity doing that, and maybe bring on some other lawyers to help. I've been connecting with all kinds of lawyers across the U.S. who are actually doing the same type of thing, and so I might see if we can all come together and create, a separate entity to help these people. Because if we put our resources together, we could probably drive the cost a little bit lower than what I'm able to do right now just by myself. But again, it's just a wonderful thing. I just feel so much fulfillment helping these people, and I had a veterans organization out of Florida that I just recently helped, and I'm big into helping veterans, and so when they kind of came to me with what they do and what their ideal was, I charged them maybe like a quarter of what I would charge somebody else, just because and here's another thing is that they're completely free. They don't charge the veterans to come and do it. They run strictly off donations from third parties, and so that kind of influenced me as well on what I charge. So it's a multifaceted thing, but I try to just do what I feel is right spiritually, in helping these people as far as cost and what I help them set up. But that's me.
Yeah, and well, the shamans and the Amazonian tribes have been talking about ayahuasca coming out to the mainstream for a long time now. There's a lot of people that have been involved with this in Peru and in these in the heart of it all, that have said they need to get the message out to the West. And I guess this is kind of like that, like the mycelium network that grows out from this central point is where it's all coming out now, coming out of the Amazon. So you don't have to fly in there and do it. And that I, like you, I do see. It's not with much challenge either. I do see the future of people being able to just pop into places and have these sessions. In Amsterdam, we can kind of see a little small model of this too. Like in Amsterdam, there's ceremonies all over the place, mushroom ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies, people running out of their homes and things like that. And I do imagine a landscape where it's just a normal thing. It's a way you treat a lot of mental illness and a lot of physical illness too.
Yeah, so me, I have a theory, and it's kind of just something that I feel spiritually is that I think the medicine and Mother Nature itself has a part in all this that's going on. I think that we have been so bad to the environment that Mother Nature is now using the plant medicine and pushing it through and just permeating all of these societies. And eventually, I think it's going to initiate a shift quicker and better on how we treat the environment than would have been if we would have just sat here and let the consequences get so bad where we say, oh, well, now we got to change something. I feel like the ayahuasca, psilocybin, all these medicines that put us in tune with nature are going to help shift that consciousness in the all across the globe. And I think a lot of it, is that we need to try to get people who are decision makers involved in this and try to bring the medicine to them, or people already in the space need to step up and try to run for office, things like that, because it's going to be very important. But yeah, I do. I see Mother Nature is directly involved in all this, and that this is, kind of, our fate.
And just finally, then, what about the website? You say it's about interconnecting people. It's a platform where people can talk about entheogens, or it's where they can find churches, or is that the deal?
So it's going to be called entheoconnect.com. And basically, what the premise is, yeah, it's going to be connecting people who are into entheogens and in spirituality, or people looking into entheogens and spirituality together with each other, together with these churches and spiritual retreats. And then also, it's going to have a forum on there where people can discuss any range of topics they wish to in a professional and non divisive way, might I add. But also a marketplace. I'm going to have a marketplace where people can list their art, their wares, their services, and different things that they might do, Zoom conferences or whatever. But just have a safe place everybody can come and engage in this type of conversation. And also, too, people who are part of movements, the here in the U.S., like to criminalize nature, people can gather there to kind of get those things going. But we're going to support every single aspect of this that's going to be moving this movement and culture in a positive direction.
Fantastic. Well, it's great, man. It's great to know that this is going on there in the States. I know there's similar things going on, like I said, in India with a friend there. So it is really a global movement. There are pockets now in the UK as well where I currently am. Places like Bali, still it's the death sentence for such things. So you can see like it's even any possession of anything like that is you can be shot for. So it is different across different countries. But I think as now the Thailand are just legalizing cannabis as well, and they have a kind of a loose attitude on the mushroom. So maybe there's some scope there in Asia too, because it is really about humanity, not just country. It's about I mean, if we could get some into China, maybe that'd help too. It's about humanity, and I know Japan particularly involved as well with DMT and talk of ayahuasca. So it's a global change. I think it's a part of our evolution. And
Yep.
so whatever what you're doing, what I'm attempting to do here as well is just part of that, passing it on to the next generation. When we're dead and gone, it's the next generation that's going to take it up, and then the whole planet may be a different place. Because I really believe that these tools are probably the only answer. And I'll go as far to say is the only answer that I can see, because I don't see us changing our kind of destructive and kind of collective egoic madness. I don't see us changing that behavior, just saying one day, okay, forget all this stuff. We're just going to stop and change our behavior. I think it's got too much momentum. I think we're going to destroy the planet before that happens. The only way I see true change is through these entheogens. And the reason I know that is because I've seen it on a personal level with me, and I hear it with people like you, people that I talk to, where their life changed overnight. So if you can do that on a collective level, we're talking about the whole species changing overnight, and whatever we're doing here is being conduits for that. So
Well, and I want to say one thing too, and about the website, and you just mentioned it, like changing this for future generations. So eventually, we're going to come up with an entheogen-friendly dating app as well. And I know a lot of people when they hear it, they're like, oh, they just don't think for some reason they have a trouble with like spirituality and a dating app. But if we want this to go generations and generations, we need to create family units of people who are plant medicine friendly. Either two people procreating, having a baby, or two people getting together and adopting children. To bring them up in a plant medicine friendly household. To break down the social conditioning that's going on. I mean, look, if kids are just continuously raised in these types of households now, it's yeah, they'll make it to the plant medicine, but after you break down 18 years of terrible social conditioning that they're taught that these things are bad, can kill you or whatever they're taught, I think it's important that we raise children, in environments where they think about plant medicines and nature in a completely different way. That we need to nature is our ally. We are originally part of nature, in that these medicines are for us to help us evolve and expand our consciousness. And so I'll just add that tidbit. It's going to be later on in the development, but our initial plan is to just start connecting these people with each other and to the churches and retreats.
yeah, I think it's so important as well in the psychological literature. My studies in psychology, and what we find is that the key cause of much crime and problems is fatherless homes and these kind of poverty-stricken backgrounds and this kind of poor breakdown of the family. I mean, actually, you can come from quite a poor family, but if the mum and dad is there and calm and cool, you're not going to have the same problems as if there's this kind of splitting up and divorce. And what we're also finding is with these entheogens, people are having better relationships, longer relationships, working things out in relationships. So it is also a kind of long-term cure to get people together that are going to have these solid upbringings and solid homes rooted in kind of connection and love and what the plant teaches, calmness. And yeah, I think that is a big step as well, not just to fix the problem, but to make sure it doesn't keep perpetuating. So
And to that end, I want to mention real quick, the church I'm part of in Texas, they're going to have their first like singles retreat. It's going to be a weekend long thing in December, and it's going to be like one, maybe 2 nights of medicine, but there's also going to be workshops, nature walks, things of that nature, just to kind of let people commingle and see what happens. It's kind of a new concept in the plant medicine community to have like singles retreats and stuff, but we're dedicated over there to experimenting and seeing what can work to try to push that kind of aspect of it along. And so I'll be glad to report back, once we're done, because I think it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
yeah, definitely, it's so good to hear that things like that are happening. Because that really is now taking the concept of modernization to a new level. It's exploring new frontiers, which is fantastic. So, Greg, yeah, I just want to say thank you. Do you just want to let us know your website again, where people can contact you if
Yeah,
they want
yeah.
to?
So on Facebook, which is my main social media, it's Greg Lake. Um, Feel free to email me. It's psychedelics in mental health at gmail.com. And then the website, I have the domain bought. I'm speaking with developers this next week. So I would say within the next month or so, we'll have some content up and should be able to start taking on members, but it's going to be www.entheoconnect.com. So just keep looking out. As soon as it's up and running, I'll make sure to post everywhere, let everybody know. And, we would appreciate all the support on the front end that we can get, and just keep this movement going, and that's the ultimate objective with this website is just, you will be supporting this movement. I promise that everything that we do in and through that site is going to be going towards the objective of moving this thing forward into the future.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Greg. I'm sure we're going to be in contact going forward and exchange ideas. I'm sure we can link up our projects somehow as well. So
Absolutely. And I got one I'm going to contact you about here shortly. But yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. I do
yeah,
appreciate you having me on, man. And look, anytime, just reach out. You know how to
perfect.
get a hold of me.
Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
brother. I appreciate you.